Once more, hello everyone, dear Mr. President of the Republic of Slovenia, Dr. Danilo Türk, dear Prime Minister Pahor, dear President of the National Assembly, Dr. Gantar, Prime Minister of Kingdom Belgium, Mr. Leterme, Secretary General of the League of the Arab States, Mr. Moussa, dear General Powell, dear Mr. Gonzalez, dear ministers, dear distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, welcome at Bled. My name is Miriam Mojgan. I'm the Secretary General of the 5th Bled Strategic Forum, but since the title is kind of a long, you can call me the General. I welcome you on behalf of my wonderful team at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who, together with our co-partner in this endeavor, Center for Strategic for European Perspective, put up this wonderful conference. I welcome you at Bled at this Alpine Jam, which is an inspiring venue by itself, but even more so when one sees so many old faces, old friends, new friends, this remarkable audience gathered here to discuss the major challenges of the decade that we have just entered. Thank you all for coming. We prepared some great program, and my boss, Minister of Foreign Affairs, will update you on the details. I'm sure you will enjoy every minute of it, and as well as enjoy the amazing scenery and the taste of the delicious Bled cream cakes. The good news is that the period of dieting is over that accompanies summer usually, so don't be shy when tasting kremšnitas, as the Bled cream cakes are called in the Slovenian language. But before I give floor to Minister Žbogar, I do want to inform all the basketball fans that are gathered here in this audience and are interested in the result of the game that just started in Turkey, the World Basketball Championship between US and Slovenia. We've instructed our Slovenian team to be merciful with the Americans. Or just to deliver the same diplomatic score as our soccer team did at the last football championship. It was a draw then, and we hope that the history repeats itself. So, a game is a game, and we'll wait for the score, but the view I'm seeing here is a pure picture of victory, a rewarding picture for everyone who was involved in this project for the last months. And I want to thank the Ministry of Defense for their support, Police, Ministry of Interior, Government Office of Communication. And we are very happy that the sun was cooperative today, which is no surprise because in the logo of our general sponsor is the sun, and we were hoping for them to deliver. So they did. So thank you, Bissol, for that. And thank you to BMW also and other sponsors. Enjoy those 2 days in Bled and hope to see you again soon, if not sooner next year. Now I kindly ask Minister Žbogar to, as your host, to give you a more detailed introduction.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you, Miriam, for breaking the ice. Welcome, really, everybody. Welcome to President Türk, President of the General Assembly, Prime Minister, and all distinguished guests. Welcome to Slovenia, and welcome to Bled. We at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs see our mission not only in bringing Slovenia to the world, but also in bringing the world to Slovenia. We see our mission in bringing foreign policy issues, foreign policy challenges, foreign policy ideas, discussions home, so we can find our role in those issues better. And this is what we are trying to do with the Bled Strategic Forum, now for the 5th time in succession. And Bled, being recognized recently by the CNN Travel as among the top 10 most beautiful lakes in the world, is of course the natural choice for such discussions. The title of this year's Bled Strategic Forum discussion is indicative of this year's challenge. We now find ourselves at a turning point. We have entered a new century. We just completed our first decennial. We witnessed dramatic changes with regard to security, with regard to environment, with regard to health, energy, and other global issues. So now we come to the question, now what do we do and how should we proceed from here? It is hard to imagine that the issue of globalization has only been at the forefront of discussion for the past 20 years. Today we are fully aware that the world is no longer a series of separate parts, as was demonstrated in particular during the recent economic crisis. We are fully aware that global security cannot be guaranteed anymore by one country alone, neither by a group of countries alone, and neither, or not even, by all countries alone. We realize that the role of the state has not been lessened. On the contrary, the wisdom of eminent statesmen can be used to effect the necessary reorganization of the existing structures. And more regulation is needed in all spheres, from financial to disarmament, to climate, and to trade. This puts great responsibility on the shoulders of decision makers, so that we may, with a broader outlook, other than just economic, and with a new mentality that we need, that we may look into our future, into times and generations that are worth living for. In this world, our people will continue to die due to war, famine, various diseases and epidemics, as well as organized crime and violence in dangerous urban areas. We will continue to be afraid of the dangers of nuclear weapons, especially if coming into the wrong hands. The overexploitation of land and the commodities it provides leads both directly and indirectly to conflict. Numerous analysts already warn of a potential food crisis. How many people can this world sustain? Some say, I just heard 9 billion people, and we are coming very fast. We are very fast approaching that figure. Experts predict that just 15 years from now, nearly 2/3 of the world's countries will be water stressed. The world's resources are becoming depleted, our civilization is tired, and our society is aging. These are just few of the many challenges that await us. What can we do? Those of us who are gathered here today, what influence can we have? What are the limits of our power, irrespective of the will to power? What can countries like Slovenia do in these situations? According to Alvin Toffler, one of the greatest futurists of our time, knowledge is the central tenet in the third wave of economy. We are happy to welcome here at Bled so many experienced and knowledgeable individuals who will gladly share their predictions and ideas on different panels. Immediately after the main panel, we will continue our debate on the role of the EU in a multipolar world. The world is waiting. Is the EU ready? This year, upon invitation from the President of the American Chamber of Commerce in Slovenia, Tomáš Lovše, the keynote address at the opening dinner of the forum will be given by General Colin Powell, former US Secretary of State. General Powell will speak about the next 10 years, the main challenges for the international community, the role of the USA, China, and the EU in the multipolar world. Tonight's Night Owl session will focus on the importance of innovation for the economic recovery and growth. The evening panel is co-organized with the OECD that Slovenia just joined, and I would like to thank its Deputy Secretary General, Ambassador Boucher, for their support. Tomorrow will be another exciting day. Like previous years, we'll devote a panel or two to the region of the Western Balkans. We'll continue our debate on establishing the trust in the Balkans and on the ways of reconnecting the Western Balkans through transport, energy, and business. We will focus on the security challenges of the Central Asia. And on the occasion of the 20th anniversary of the Internet, Entrepreneurs, academics, and policymakers will discuss how the web has revolutionized our lives and what is yet to come. Energy and water, goes without saying, certainly deserve the attention it is receiving today. In this search for alternative energy sources, we face a dependency on research and development, as well as ever-increasing prices of energy. In this respect, we should devote more attention to showing respect for basic commodities in the future. The most fundamental of them is naturally water. Unlike energy, water has no alternative. With the right policies and priorities, and with strong will, many countries are managing water resources effectively. Therefore, we must not lose sight of opportunities that the 21st century is offering. As Albert Einstein said, in the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. We have the opportunity here at this forum to use the diverse experience and knowledge to address these challenges. In the end, let me also use this opportunity to thank the companies, the enterprises that supported this conference. It is the biggest support that we've received so far from the mostly Slovenian companies to support the event. It testifies to the successful public-private partnership that has its place in Slovenia. It also testifies that in a way, that business diplomacy is the right priority for Ministry of Foreign Affairs. In particular, I would like to thank our two general main sponsors, BSOL, a young but enormously successful and innovative Slovenian company located in Prebold, a company that makes use of another commodity, the sun. BSOL is the only industrial-level manufacturer of premium quality photovoltaic modules in Slovenia, with rich international experience in manufacturing the core elements of solar power plants. And I also like to thank BMW Group Slovenia that provided us with the official vehicle of this year's conference, and I want to thank them for their continuing support. And at the end, I would like to thank, as Miriam did, to my colleagues at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and also to Miriam, the General, for help in organizing this event, and the team of the Center of European Perspective, who worked tirelessly over the past months. So, dear distinguished guests, allow me to wish you many fruitful discussions and many innovative thinking that is in big need in these days. So welcome to Bled, and I wish you all a pleasant stay. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. I would like to invite someone who has the privilege to live in this charming city for the whole year. Major of Bled, Janez Pfeiffer.
Thank you. Dobrodošli na Bledu. Welcome to Bled. It really is a privilege to live here. And it is not only one of the nice tasks of the mayor to welcome people like you, as distinguished as you are, and as important decision makers as you are, to this little place. We are only a small country of 2 million people, and in this 211 municipalities. One is this one here in Bled. Our slogan is Imago Paradisi, image of paradise. It's not always like that if you're mayor, of course. But at least for the tourists, I hope, and the visitors, it might be an inspiration to all of you. I was this morning at our Alpine Association on the mountain and coming down an hour ago among the grazing cows and beautiful meadows and trees. And I said the world is beautiful. And I hope this is what people of Bled and all of Slovenia can convey to you. Think on that, and think on the others. You can make the life better and nicer. This would be my short message. Please mingle among yourself. It's a fantastic mosaic of people of all over the world, of all religions, of all political options. Doesn't matter. We are still people. We are still sent by the same God to the same place. So thank you for trusting us, and welcome also next year. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Pfeiffer. Our guest of honor, President of the Republic of Slovenia, Dr. Danilo Turk, needs no introduction. Mr. President, I kindly ask you to take the floor and address this distinguished audience.
Dragi prijatelji, spoštovani gostje, veliko veselje mi je, da lahko spregovorim nekaj besed ob otvoritvi tega pomembnega srečanja. Dear friends, distinguished visitors and guests, it's a great privilege and honor to say a few words and express a few thoughts at the opening of this important gathering. Now, Bled Strategic Forum is a special event in Slovenia. It is probably the only event which brings together thinkers, decision makers from Slovenia and from the world far and wide to discuss some of the most important and most pressing issues of today. The title of the forum this year is The Global Outlook for the Next Decade. Now, the formulation of that title suggests that the authors were hesitating. And in fact, they wanted to leave the space for discussion wide open and to allow everybody to come with fresh, innovative ideas. There is no command in this title. There is no direction suggested. It is only an invitation to thought and reflection. And let me try together with you to reflect upon some of the themes which might be of interest to the participants at this forum. Last year, when we met at the end of August, the topic was the politics of the crisis. At that time, crisis was still a phenomenon which needed to be overcome, and where the questions of politics of the crisis, the options, dilemmas, were at the center of our deliberations. At that time, we were also hopeful. We were optimistic in some ways. We believed that crisis brings opportunities. And among the optimistic thoughts at that time was also the thought of the then nearing global summit on global warming in Copenhagen, and the ideas which were spread about the changes, reforms of the international financial system. If we look from today's perspective to what happened between the end of August of 2009 and today, we can clearly see that many of those expectations have not materialized. The Copenhagen summit was partial success at best. Financial reforms, including reform of the quota system of the International Monetary Fund, have not yet materialized, and the progress towards those ends remains painfully slow. Here we have a problem, something that constitutes an important part of the outlook for the next decade. How is the world going to cope with this? What kind of answers should be given today, and how to make sure that those answers are credible and that they are realistic? In 3 weeks from now, New York will witness one of its summits, a summit on the Millennium Development Goals and another one on biodiversity. I remain hopeful. I hope that those summits will produce agreements which will generate real progress. I remain hopeful, but I'm not certain, because certainty would require a very high degree of realistic analysis and honest assessment of the situation in which the world is finding itself. Honesty, realistic assessment is something what we need most. And honesty begins with intellectual honesty. So today, at the beginning of this forum, I place a great deal of hope in the collectual brain power of people gathered in this hall, and in your intellectual honesty, because that's the starting point in any discussion about the global outlook for the next decade. But I would also like to draw your attention to another quality which is needed, which is really seriously needed at this point in history. and that is imagination. We have to be imaginative in thinking about solutions for the future. A couple of weeks ago, I read an interesting article by an Oxford professor by the name of Timothy Williams, professor of logic at Oxford University. Professor Williams explained how imagination represents an important ingredient of scientific and every other thinking. And he emphasizes that imagination is not daydreaming, and it is not only there to help generating new ideas. It can be, and it very often is, very highly reality-directed. It is directed towards changing the reality and towards preservation of humankind. And that's the kind of imagination that we need today. Professor Williams also explains that in the scientific process, imagination is needed not only to generate the idea of direction of change, but also in testing the results, in finding out whether the ideas under observation are justified and right. That too requires imagination. And finally, imagination helps us to move from the realm of past and present reality towards the new, complex reality, a reality defined by legitimate expectations that we have. Now, this is all important in thinking about the role of imagination in our thinking today and in our thought about the global outlook for the coming decade. Ladies and gentlemen, I know that what I have said may sound very abstract, but abstractions are something we have to start with and then make them much more specific in the process. If one thinks about imagination in the context of diplomacy, one doesn't have to reach too far to see that imaginative ideas do exist. Let me only choose one example: the initiative of Brazil and Turkey to deal with the nuclear issue of Iran. That initiative, which was made visible in early June this year, gave rise to hope. That hope has been met with realistic and well-meaning challenges. But hope is still there, and I do hope that imagination is still there, and that in the area of nuclear weapons and in the specific question of Iranian nuclear program, we shall have enough diplomatic imagination to find a way forward, a way beyond sanctions, a way beyond threats to the peace. This is one example. One can think about many other examples, some of which will require a collective effort, an effort of a large number of countries, and an effort of a large number of thinkers. Let us take a moment or two to reflect upon Afghanistan, the crisis situation which probably today attracts more attention than any other crisis anywhere else in the world. Any military analyst will tell you that when moving a military force to a distant country, at the time before deployment, it becomes clear that there is no strategy without exit. That a strategist has to have an idea, has to have a vision of how to enter and how to exit a situation. But then towards the end of that situation, any diplomat will tell you that without strategy there is no exit, because leaving a country or a situation in shambles, leaving it in chaos, is not exit, and certainly is not strategy. So how does one deal with situations like this? How does one engage a sufficient intellectual energy and sufficient imagination to find proper responses? Today, I believe it is high time to think seriously about exit strategy for Afghanistan. Now, exit, of course, doesn't mean immediate ending of all military presence. Exit means a carefully thought through system of measures which the international community may deploy to assist the political forces of Afghanistan and the countries in the region so as to ensure that the ultimate result is stable and sustainable. This is the challenge before us today. And how do we deal with that challenge? Certainly, part of the answer lies within the frontiers of Afghanistan. There has to be an internal process, and every effort has to be made to help, to the extent necessary, the forthcoming parliamentary elections. But even more important, it is clear that without an effective regional agreement, peace and stability in Afghanistan cannot be ensured. And I repeat, an effective regional agreement involving all neighbor states and some other players. Are we sure that enough work has been done already that such an agreement might be possible in the foreseeable future? Here is a challenge for intellectuals like you, policymakers like you, and all of us who would like to make a contribution in this long and arduous search to the solution to the situation in Afghanistan. And there is no doubt that the legitimate expectations about the complex future will require imaginative solutions, among which the regional agreement will be paramount. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I could go on in discussing this kind of questions where honest analysis, realistic assessment, and imagination need to work together. There are many other challenges which require precisely such a combination of qualities. But on the other hand, time is short, and you certainly do not expect from me to spend the rest of the evening ruminating about my ideas on these matters. So I will mention only one further example, and that is the challenge for the European Union as a global player, something that this forum will discuss in some detail later on. Here, again, imagination will be required, and I would suggest that that be focused on a single concept, the concept of partnerships. European Union, if it wishes to be an effective, significant global player, has to develop its partnerships with other players properly. With India, China, very importantly with the United States as a partner with which European Union has been working for a long time, but where new, fresh ideas are needed. And perhaps most importantly, with Russia, with a major actor of Eurasian area and of global affairs, which is more open today than it was in any preceding period of history, with the possible exception of the period of Peter the Great. Now, Russia has declared the policy of modernization. That policy has not been formulated to the finest detail, and there is a need for partnership in formulation of that policy and in the development of European Union role in that context. Some of these discussions will require addressing very fundamental, very serious questions such as security or energy, but also very practical issues such as visa regime and liberalization, which is needed to expand human contact and provide a sufficiently broad and sufficiently populous basis for policy making in the future. Without that, partnership will not be completed. Now, ladies and gentlemen, these are some of the thoughts I wish to bring before you at the beginning of this meeting, and then again, I would like to emphasize how very much I and many others expect from the collective brain power of this room. I have ended my thoughts with European Union because that is where much of our thinking in Slovenia is today. And I hope that this fifth meeting of the Bled Strategic Forum will make a contribution. In fact, I don't only hope, I have no doubt. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President, for this wonderful analysis. It's a great honor and privilege to ask our main speaker, Prime Minister of the Republic of Slovenia, Borut Pahor, to address this audience.
Mr. President, Speaker, dear colleagues, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, friends, it's really an honor and a privilege to address this Bled Forum. I will avoid to be long. I will just offer a couple of thoughts, a couple of dilemmas, and maybe one or two messages. The financial and economic crisis has essentially sharpened all dilemmas and problems inherited from the previous century. In view of our historical experience, we may well ask ourselves whether humanity will be able to overcome these problems and avoid war of broad dimensions. Although the international community, especially in the second half of the last century, developed new mechanisms of protecting peace, stability, and security, we know that there are no guarantees whatsoever for light-heartedness. We are, paradoxically, best protected by the realization that such a war, in view of the destructive power of the existing weapons, may be the very last war and would end our civilization. So it is normal that everybody's curious about at least the short-term future of the increasingly connected and interdependent world. The crisis, which has aggravated the existing contracts in many respects, call for at least relatively uniform and consistent response by the international community. We can see, however, and this is my personal observation, the very limited success of these attempts. Within the EU, we have witnessed some limited success of joint anti-crisis policy, which applies even more, for example, to G20. A unique characteristic of this crisis, which is very deep, is that the economy has never been so global. The awareness of the injustice it reveals it so global too. This is something new. We have a global economy, but on the other side, we have also a global awareness of the injustice. Since the successes of the joint policy are, at least in my view, very limited, national governments, mine also, are returning back to more or less independent actions. This is not necessarily a bad thing, unless the nature of resolving economic and social conflicts makes this grow into a security conflict. This is not just an academic opinion of mine. Let me tell you an example. If we had failed to find a solution for the bilateral dispute between Slovenia and neighboring Croatia concerning the border issue on one side, or the blocking of Croatian negotiation with EU Commission on the other side a year ago, In my view, the economic and social tensions in both countries, especially considering their impact on the countries of the Western Balkans, could grow into a security issue. We avoid it. I wonder if all crisis zones or situations threatened by them in different parts of the world will be treated with enough reasons or luck or necessary political courage to arrive at a peaceful solution for such difficult problems. What I want to say is this, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen. The world is experiencing a global crisis, yet the international community seems to lack adequate mechanisms to put in place an effective common anti-crisis policy. In the near future, we expect to witness endeavors of individual governments for economic recovery, but what is needed is to strengthen common mechanisms and develop new ones. Mr. President has spoken before about a common need to think, to be imaginative on new mechanisms, on new ideas, on new tools to fight different dilemmas of the new centuries. I fully agree with him. This is also my message. However, we must, this is probably the reality of the world, we must not expect to see rapid and, some miraculous solutions. The problems resides in the fact that we are facing basically two concepts of development. One, we call it concept of sustainable development. It is a concept more or less advocated by a modern world, to call it so. On the other side, it is a concept of fast-growing economies all over the world, from China to India to Brazil and others, who don't take very much care about, it seems so, about this concept. They are saying, sorry guys, I've been to this conference that Mr. President mentioned before, Copenhagen conference, last December. I had a feeling that those BRIC countries and others said, listen guys, you've been developing your societies very rapidly and successfully, and right now you are telling us that it's enough with this concept, which brought you a high-level standards, and now you are calling for a different concept, which is quite good for us. And we would like to go on with the concept as once it was, and it's good for us in the future. So, no greater attention to the social dimension of the development, no greater attention to the so-called climate aspect of the development. Let us focus on economic growth. Nothing else is so important than to be strong at this point of development. So we are facing right now two concepts. And we, Slovenians, we have to think as one of Europeans. European model is model of sustainable development. And we cannot think about Slovenia and we cannot think about Europe without, for example, a social dimension of development. Nobody in our country would agree that we go for diverse or different concept of development, which would not include social cohesion, for example. Well, in my view, and I do respect absolutely all that China and India and Brazil have achieved, and they are doing at the moment. But I think this is not dilemma in their part of the world. And now we are knocking on the door of one very important question: how to be competitive. How to be competitive here in Slovenia with this decision that we would like to have a sustainable development, this sort of concept, with countries, large countries, with very high economic growth, that they are not so keen about social dimension and about green dimension of their development. So my question is, how to inspire the dialogue, the relationship, not just economic, also political, to deal with the problems arising out of two concepts that we are facing with. And we have to find out a proper solution if we would like to avoid some sort of conflicts, maybe even a war of broader So I think we have a very, very dramatic role to play, we as decision makers. We have to, as I said, inspire the dialogue, and this is, I think, very good spot to exchange views on what is good and what is bad for humanity, not just for one or second countries. And we have to find out ways to overcome problems, those economic, social, and even security problems, which is not just a problem for one or two countries, but in this global society, it is a problem for everybody. So I think those ideas of such forums around the world are very good ideas. We will talk about global outlook for the next decade. I think nobody is so smart in this room that could come here and tell us what will happen in the future. It is enough to be aware of the problems we have right now in front of us and to pay a necessary attention to our responsibility, not to do nothing to jeopardize trust in debate and exchange of views in spite and because of political and other diversity among us. So I would like to see this Bled Forum as a place where we can talk speak, think about different ideas, how to go on, and maybe to conclude our sessions with something what we all need very much. And this is in facing all these problems, economic, social, security, with some sort of small optimism. We desperately need an optimism for the future. We cannot face the problems with the fear. This will not help us to solve the problems. We acknowledge that problems are here. We are responsible to address them. And we are ready to address them listening to each other with different ideas. Our responsibility is that we do not use fear because of the problems we are facing to go back to the past, but with slight optimism, go ahead to the future. If Forum Bled will help us to think positively and will encourage us to face problems and face problems together, having different opinion, having different thoughts, I think it will be a successful forum, and I think you will come back next year. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. I want to thank you for your thoughts, and I now kindly ask Xenia Benedetti and her efficient team to kindly escort distinguished guests to follow their demanding program. Mr. President and Mr. Prime Minister, I really thank you for your contributing to this opening scene.